going to tell you a little bit about the Durant and where it came from. It's the interest is not the car, its age, but its interest is where it came from and who developed it. There was a guy that was, his name was William Durant. He was born in 1861. And he was a pretty ambitious guy. He dropped out of high school so he could go to work. In 1925, he started carriage company, Armstrong Carriage Company. Durant Carriage Company. But by 1900, he had the largest carriage company in the United States. So he's making a lot of money. Can y'all hear? Up here, okay? Woo! I'm yelling. Anyway, in 1904, he sold the carriage company. And he used that money he found a car company that was struggling to sell cars. He bought Buick. And now when you say a guy bought a car company, you got to remember all these car companies, that was very immature. They weren't built on assembly lines. They were built one car at a time. So they were relatively inexpensive. But he saw that the money was in automobiles. So he bought his first car for rent. 4 years later, he had an idea. He said, you know, we need cars, a lot of cars, under one umbrella. Cars to fit every income bracket. So he started a company to bring in other cars. He called it General Motors. So this is the guy that started General Motors. So almost immediately, he bought some other cars. He bought Cadillac, Oldsmobile, the Oakland, which turned out to be Pontiac eventually, and 9 other cars. In 1909, he actually tried to buy Ford Motor Company. That fell through. He put together an $8 million deal, but Henry Ford didn't want it. Trouble was, he was so ambitious, he overextended General Motors. Now, he had a board of directors, and the board of directors of the banks kicked him out of his own company. So not being outdone, he decided he'd found another car company he could help with. So there was a guy named Louis Chevrolet. He was trying to build cars himself. So he bought the Chevrolet company, the car from Louis Chevrolet. It took him 6 years, but he accumulated enough money through Chevrolet to buy enough stock to regain control of General Motors. So he brought in Chevrolet to General Motors. Well, in 1920, once again, the board booted him out. He'd been booted out of his own company twice. So this time he said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to build my own car company. So in January 1921, he founded the Durant Motor Car Company. And in 4 months and 7 days, he had a prototype ready for testing. And then within a year after that, he had it into production. So that's where this car came from. But he wanted a whole line of cars. So he developed some other cars in different price ranges. For instance, he had one called the Star that was priced against the Model A. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Model T. Then he had one that was priced, this car was priced against Chevrolet. So he had another car called the Dart that was between the two. And then there was another car that had been around since the beginning of the century. This was a big car. This car would compete against Cadillac, so he needed a high-end car. This one he didn't have to develop because it already existed. The name of this car was the Locomobile. A terrible name for a car, but it was a nice-looking car. Everything went good for Durant until 1929. 1929, and the stock market crashed. So William was that was his way, his last straw. The company kept going down and down and down until 1933, it went bankrupt. that wasn't the end of the story for Durant, because he was living on a pension of $10,000 a year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in today's dollars, that was over $200,000. So he wasn't doing too bad. So he had an idea of starting a bowling alley chain. And he actually did start one bowling alley. He had a restaurant in it. He thought he was going to develop like 30 bowling alleys. Never panned out. So he tried other things along the way. In the middle 40s, he had a stroke. And he was not able to do much after that. He died in 1947. He had so many medical bills and his family had to pay them all off and left him financially bankrupt. So it's a sad ending to a guy that actually started a company. As a matter of fact, he even came up with the concept of dealer franchise. So that's how far thinking he was. So that, anyway, that's the story of Durant. Now let me tell you, I'm going to tell you, some of y'all, yes, thank you. Some of y'all got invitations. And the invitation said, it's 100 years old, okay? Charlie Peake was, he and I were talking. Where's Charlie? There he is, he's back here behind me. He said, boy, she looks really good. I mean, she's in good shape. Well, Diane and I actually had that conversation. She's 100 years old. And so she said, cars have gender? And I said, well, you know what guys say, just like Charlie, she looks good and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to be politically correct and change it to it. Then I got to thinking, man, it's just a few weeks ago, this lady was testifying before Congress, and they asked her, can you give the definition of a woman? And she said she couldn't because she wasn't a biologist. And I got to thinking, well, I can't say that this is a woman because I'm not a mechanic. So I guess a mechanic can look underneath and figure it all out. So anyway, the actual birthday of this car is June 2nd, 1922. Well, that's the 100th birthday. So it's about 36 days older than that. Its first owner lived in Portland, Maine, and they started building these things in, I think it's like in New York State and then Michigan and various places, but that dealership happened to be in Maine. I'm going to back up just a minute and tell you something that I missed because it's kind of important. Durant actually wanted a whole line of cars. Did I tell you that? Yeah. This is it's a pretty rare car. You don't see many of these. I've tried to see how many 22 Durants there were. I can tell you it's as rare as a Rolls Royce in a Walmart parking lot. Man, there's almost none of them. I can only find about 12 of them. And so if there are more out there, I don't know about it. This is a touring model. And the reason why, I think the only reason why it's a touring model is it was cheap to build and cheap to own. There were other models that had hard tops and roll up wheels, but of course they were more expensive. This car sold originally for $890. So it was a price. As a matter of fact, in the manual that I have, it says never lower the top. So obviously it's not really convertible. It has a 4-cylinder engine, overhead valves for these guys that are mechanically inclined, which is for this year, that's a pretty sophisticated engine. It's fast, y'all. It goes from 0 to 45 eventually. and it only has rear brakes. So when you get up to 45, if you want to go back to 0 as fast as you can, eventually. So, it stops really slow. Somebody, I think it's my brother-in-law said this one time. She said when she first said, boy, they don't build them like that anymore. Well, thank God, because this thing is a shorter drive. The maintenance is unbelievable. If you follow the maintenance, you would change the oil every 1,000 miles. It has 32 lube points. Some of them you have to lubricate every 100 miles. You have to drain the radiator every 3 months and refill it. You got to rinse it and refill it. The transmission only goes 2,500 miles, and then you can drain it, fill it with kerosene, refill it. So it's a chore to keep these cars running. It had standard equipment. That's important because it came with a wheel. No tire, just the wheel. So you have a wheel back there, but you had to buy a tire if you wanted to spare. Air condition works great in this car. The faster you go, the better it works. The more you can open that up, these things open up, little air comes through there. Going 30 miles an hour, you get about a 30 mile an hour wind. So, you know, it works really good. The horn, blow the horn. Okay, it's not a hoo-ga horn, it's just a woo horn. You know, if you wanted to ug, you'd have to pay extra for that. So, I never drive in the rain. I take good care of it, primarily because I don't want to get wet. But it doesn't have direction signals. That's a scary thing, because I don't know, the older people in the group know what hand signals are. Left turn, right turn, slowing down. People behind you think, what's that guy waiting on? You know what I mean? So it's a little dangerous to drive. So, but anyway, that's the story of the Durant and our car. So what we're going to do is we're going to light the candles. I want you all to sing happy birthday, please, because you don't want to hear me. You're going to drown me out. We'll blow out the candles and we're going to cut the cake. All right?